Following news that the deficit has increased by quite a bit thanks to the Trump tax cuts, now the administration is looking on how to plug those deficit holes. And of course, they're going to do so by coming for your earned benefits. Yes, they're coming for your Social Security and your Medicare. Now, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow said that, quote, we should, I'm sorry, that's not a quote, that we should expect cuts in entitlement programs should Republicans continue to control Congress. Here's his quote: "We have to be tougher on spending." And of course, these are in remarks to the Economic Club of New York. Now, he also added that government spending was the reason for the wider budget deficits, not the Republican-led tax cuts that went into effect this year. Oh, no, it's not tax cuts. They have nothing to do with more of a deficit. We just cut our income. But that has absolutely nothing to do with the deficit whatsoever, man. Okay. Now, here's the thing. That's insanity. How can you say that cutting your revenue will not add to a deficit? Growth, economic growth. What economic growth? The Trump tax cuts have had literally no effect on the economic growth of this country. It's insanity, right? Insanity. But like these $1 trillion tax cuts, which have cost somewhere around $1.4 to $1.8 trillion over 10 years, or will cost that much over 10 years, is somehow not at fault. But you're $700 in Social Security. Well, I mean, that's the reason we have such a gigantic deficit. We have to do something about that. I have to note that Social Security doesn't add a penny to the deficit. Nonetheless, they want to continue to say, oh, no, we've got to cut Social Security because it's going bankrupt and because, of course, that's the reason that we have such high deficits. In fact, here's the thing. Quote, we're going to run deficits of about 4 to 5% of GDP for the next year. I'd rather they were lower, but it's not a catastrophe. Going down the road, of course, we'd like to slim that down as much as possible, and we'll work at it. And he stated that the biggest factor for revenue was economic growth. A quicker pace, he said, will bring more revenue, adding that President Trump's economic policies were aimed at boosting the U.S. growth rate. Again, that hasn't happened. And here's the thing. They're not saying it quite outright because it'd be political suicide. But when they say, oh, no, we've got to rein in spending, especially when it comes to entitlement spending, well, we all know what that means. Look, this is the plan, okay? Look, when it comes to economic growth, you cannot make an argument that the tax cuts have actually made economic growth better. If you're looking at the stock market and the GDP, you're not looking at the whole picture, because those two things are not by themselves a good metric for the economic well-being of this country. People like Kudlow are failing to take wages into consideration, which, again, another promise of the Trump tax cuts was, well, if we cut taxes for corporations, then they're going to raise your wages. That way we don't need a minimum wage. We don't need to raise the minimum wage. No, we're just going to cut taxes for corporations because they're going to do it themselves. Did that happen? Not at all. There were no significant wage gains as a result of these tax cuts. But see, that's not an accident. Low wages are why corporate profits are so high. They gained, in just this quarter, 16.1% corporate profits. That's not an accident. These companies, they're not making more sales. They're buying back their own stock. They're artificially inflating the value of their companies, and they're not paying their workers more. They're stuffing that money in their pockets. And the thing is, the CEOs, they are now cashing out their stock options. They buy back their own stock, and then they cash out. They make millions. And they're doing that because they know this is unsustainable. And nonetheless, they are plowing ahead with tax cuts 2.0. Kudlow said on that he did not expect the Congress would be able to make the Trump administration's recent individual tax cuts permanent before the November 6th midterm congressional elections. He said, I don't think it will get through the whole Congress before the election, but added that making the personal tax cuts permanent is, quote, a good message, and disagreed with the forecast that they would further increase budget deficits. But they will. They will increase budget deficits. That's what happens when you cut revenue, you get less money. But again, Kudlow, he knows he can do simple math. And he says, I don't care. You might think of him and think, he's an idiot. We know tax cuts increase the deficit. It is simple math. But see, Kudlow isn't dumb. He knows that he is part of the biggest robbery of the American public this century. And that's what this is. These corporate tax cuts, they are a gigantic robbery. And part of that robbery includes that when we run out of, well, we're never going to run out of money, but when deficits get so high, you're going to have Republicans saying, well, we need to rob your Social Security and Medicare to pay for it. That is part of that robbery. They're going to take it from you and put it into their own pockets, and of course, into the pockets of their donors. The whole point is that they want to, well, they want to privatize Social Security. They want to privatize Medicare. They want to give it over to the corporations. And then, well, then they're going to laugh all the way to the bank with your money. So that's what you're going to get with a Republican Congress. Elections have consequences. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.